Okay, so let's kick off. I want to give a little bit of context before we dive into the details of things. Again, as I said, I've even got slides for it. Don't panic. If you haven't done the free word, don't worry. Who am I? I probably didn't need to duplicate my face on the side, but I am Phil Bennett. I am a software engineering leadership consultant and in brackets author. I am British. You might be able to tell by my accent. If I say stuck in Berlin, there's a very long story to that. I do love Berlin and I enjoy being here, but as it currently stands, I wouldn't have a choice anyway. So I am stuck here. I have 25 years experience in software engineering and leadership. Some people say I don't look that old, but if you can probably tell by the gray hair that we're a little bit older than a lot of people in the software development industry. I wrote a book called Punk Leadership, which talks about software engineers and software engineering leaders taking responsibility for the technology they build and taking ownership of the impact that technology has. I am a founder of a company called Bravefork, which is a knowledge management platform, and I am a consultant fixer of unfixable engineering teams. As of now, also I haven't found a good way to summarize it, but I would say AI equality evangelist is probably the best way to summarize it. So why am I giving this talk? Why am I giving this workshop? I'm giving this workshop for, I think, one main reason, and that is because if anyone tells you they understand and they know what is going to happen with technology over the next couple of years, they are probably wrong and they probably don't know. There is so much going on that it's very hard to predict. But I have a suspicion, let's call it, that what is going to happen over the next couple of years is very similar to what happened in the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s in the UK and then around. As technology made this kind of massive leap forward in terms of what was possible, those that had a lower base, had some kind of education, like a baseline education and some kind of capital to invest in what was happening, moved ahead of the general population. And that kind of formed this new middle class, which still exists in the UK and across the globe. And I really suspect or feel or think, it's really a guess, but this is my model of how I'm thinking about things, that we are heading into a situation where there is going to be a new digital middle class. So those that have some kind of technical baseline founding and who have some capital to invest a little bit in more powerful models are going to be able to utilize and leverage this technology more than other people. And that should help them differentiate themselves. So we'll have the kind of like separation in who is able to use this technology and who is not so much able to use this technology and has less of an impact for it. So this is why I wanted to run a course looking at this new technology that has appeared in the last couple of months and try and help people who maybe don't feel that they have that kind of technical understanding and don't feel comfortable in it, move into this kind of space where they feel comfortable and feel like they're able to run this technology and use the more modern technology before it filters down into general popular use. So that's why I'm kind of giving this course. So what is the goal today? The goal is to get everyone and set up with we'll talk about security after we set up the thing, but again, everyone set up with a safe-ish OpenClaw AI assistant that can perform an action in a web browser. The example that I have given in the course notes in the description of the course is a LinkedIn prospector, and that's how we'll model it, show this agent the ability to go through and look for people on LinkedIn for you, but you will be able to, at the end of this, have an ability for your agent to do anything that involves the web browser. Fingers crossed. I want to talk a little bit about AI hype versus reality, because the situation that's currently going on with the advancements in AI is a mix of both. And there is a lot of hype and there is some reality that means it is maybe not as exciting as those people looking for investment in their startup will tell you necessarily. Things that AI, I think, is currently really good at. These things have really developed in the last couple of months. One is software coding and writing software and building software applications. We have made a massive leap really in the last 3 months. If you'd asked anyone in the software development industry in the end of last year whether engineers were likely to be replaced with coding agents, they would be like, nah, maybe in the future, maybe at some time. But the models have made massive leap forward and really fairly consistently everyone on the same page that this works now. Someone from Anthropic, which is the big competitor that runs Claude for OpenAI, the big competitor OpenAI that runs Claude, said they feel that coding is now solved in inverted commas. And I think that's a huge leap forward and I fully agree. Then the other thing that it's always been good at is this ability to translate normal English or normal spoken language into technical details, which is something that I have spent a lot of time training to do over a long period of time. But because they are like language models that kind of connect words that are closely associated to each other, it is very good and has been very good for a while at being able to take some kind of human description in natural language and translate that into what is required technically. So that is where we've got this kind of leap forward in AI agents. And it's also very good at collecting and summarizing and synthesizing information that it can collect online. What AI is not great at currently is, I think the way that I think about this is you have to model this and think about it as a very fast, like, intern. And if you think of this model of someone joining a company, it's very common in software engineering and maybe in other fields where you have somebody who's just very enthusiastic and wants to make their mark as quickly as possible, but doesn't have the full context and the full picture and hasn't gone through those experiences to know when they should stop doing something, and maybe isn't even really fully aware of their own limits and capabilities. And that's how I treat these kind of agents. And that's how I think is a good way to model it. It's not very good at making kind of common sense judgments. It doesn't have that big mental context that a human would have. It doesn't know about what might be unspoken in terms of content. So you have to make sure and when I say context, I'm not talking about the technical model context. I just mean the general context of the task that you're giving it. You need to think a little bit about making sure that everything is explained to it and it has all of that business context or limitations that you want to put on it. It's also not very good at knowing when to stop unless you give it measurements and markers to say, actually, if this happens, then make sure you stop. And because of interesting developments in how these models are working, they're also not very good at admitting it doesn't know something. So it will hallucinate and pretend that it knows something, even if it might not necessarily know the real truth. So they are not necessarily to be 100% trusted because they're not 100%, the content and the information isn't necessarily 100% truthful. And it's not necessarily a fault of the model itself. It's to do with how it's trained and the source of information that's gone into that model and the feedback loop that has gone to making it better as it went through its development. So what is OpenClaw? OpenClaw is a agent, I guess, operating system or a management system. And what it does is it connects some sort of communication channel, whether that be some sort of messaging system like WhatsApp or Telegram or Slack or basically anything that you would communicate with another human. Generally, you can connect to that. We'll talk a little bit about this as we go through it. Some are easier to use than others. For this example, we're going to use Telegram because it's just the easiest to set up, but you can connect other things to it. And then that orchestrates your requests to models, whether that be a ChatGPT, Claude. Cool. And then what I was saying, so the OpenClaw is this agent, I guess, operating system or agent management platform that connects your channels to the models and then a set of tools that it is able to use. One of those is a browser. The other ones are CLI tools that you can do all sorts of different things with, interact with email accounts, anything that really you can do from a computer in an automated way. Integrate with the APIs, all sorts of things. The story behind OpenClaw is absolutely fascinating. This is a graph that shows you how quickly this software has taken off. And this is also, I think, something very interesting and shows you how software development has massively changed. These more gradual lines are a couple of really important pieces of software to the software development community, things that we use for building front ends of web applications and operating. In fact, the Linux operating system is the pink line here. There's an operating system that you will have downloaded and set up on your virtual machine. And these have taken over a decade have built up over time. And OpenClaw was only released at the end of last year and has exploded in this time and is now almost as popular as some of the things that have been around for years. So it shows the journey and the power potentially that this platform allows you to do. The other thing that is also interesting in this journey is there are now also already hundreds of clones and copies of OpenClaw that might be that sell themselves as being more secure, faster, better, or niche in some way that now exist. There is hundreds of these, I think probably tens at this moment, approaching 100 of these clones and copies of OpenClaw that must have only existed in the last month or so, have been developed over time to pop up into this ecosystem. So it's fascinating that the pace that this stuff is moving at. Anyway, what can you do with OpenClaw? So we're going to go and talk to Gary Botlington, who is my main OpenClaw assistant. And I'm going to ask him, if I can find him in all my tabs, Gary, can you give me a summary of what you've been doing for me recently? It's typing. It's not, one thing that's worth noting is it's not super fast. It takes some processing and some back and forth in certain systems. So you're not necessarily going to get like an immediate and super quick answer. And also putting the risk, Anthropic's Claude has had some outages over the last couple of days. Okay, cool. He has come back. Some of you would have already interacted with Gary. He sent some emails out as welcomes to the workshop. And we have another workshop running. He sent out some emails to those. There's some names here which we probably should show. And then he is also, I am a consultant. So what Gary is also doing is he's looking through some Slack communities for me to see whether there's potential work, whether there is some fractional CTO and kind of engineering leadership consultancy type work. And he's looking for opportunities in some Slack groups. And then he's also managing the email onboarding for my Brainful platform. So sending people welcome emails, asking whether they need any support, doing those kind of things you would do with some sort of automation. And then I'm also using him to manage a content generation system for me, where I give him some rough ideas for blog posts and ideas. And then he comes back with more fleshed out, structured drafts. And then we go back, and I'm dyslexic. So writing, it's a challenge, and I can't make lots of things. So then he'll proof, and we'll go through. He's using as a proofreader, or a kind of create some context. So that's, I guess it's probably using it more as a kind of ghostwriter for me for these blog posts. And then some other bits and pieces in terms of monitoring and things like that, which I'm finding him very useful to manage. So really, these agents can do a lot of things not quite out of the box, but I haven't really had to configure him much to do these things. In fact, he's done most of the configuration of these things himself. And these things still blow my mind a little bit about what is really possible with these technologies. This is all stuff that has been possible for a while, but having one platform that can do all of these things is really interesting. Okay. How this workshop will run, we will go now into the kind of hands-on part. I will leave a little gap in a minute for some questions. We'll go through it step by step. I will run things fairly slowly. And if you have some questions, don't raise your hands in the thing, just shout out and I can hear you, and we can go through whatever problem that you might have at that point. But as we go through every step, I'll give some space and some ability to ask questions. And then the other thing is, don't worry if you I think we are this technology, although I think accessible to everybody, is bleeding edge technology, which is the thing that is slightly more cutting edge than cutting edge. And what that means is changing all the time. And we are probably going to come across some hiccups and some bumps in the road. And you might get to a blocker that we can't work out in this workshop. Don't worry. Like the people who haven't done the pre-work, everything will be recorded. You can go through it in your own time. And also, you can email Gary after the session, and he will be able to support you with any questions and queries. He's very aware of his own system, so he can normally help. But if he can't answer the question, he will direct to me, and I can then interject and add some context. So how we're going to work through this, there's some additional dependencies that we need to install before we go into it. Then we're going to install and configure OpenClaw, and then we're going to build a LinkedIn prospector. I have a small disclaimer before we go into this. LinkedIn is not a massive fan of bots and agents accessing the platform because they want you to buy their Sales Navigator platform. We will get to a point where we will set up you accessing and logging into your LinkedIn and giving the agent access to that. There is a very small possibility, and I think it's very small, that LinkedIn might temporarily block your account if you do this. So if LinkedIn is your world and it is incredibly important to you and you can't afford a small blockage, then consider that. But I've been using this for a couple of months now, and I haven't been blocked. I think the key is it's okay. It doesn't seem to mind if you're just accessing information and searching. The second you start sending messages and automated interactions with content, that's when they start to get very upset. Okay, so we're going to jump into the thing. So I'm going to give a pause now. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions about what we're going to do? Any concerns? Any questions about what I just said?
Hi, Phil.
Hey.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited for this. Just a quick question. Do we need to go ahead with this particular example for LinkedIn, or would it still be make sense to do something in parallel that's a different use case?
You can, so we will get to a point where we'll have the system set up with your model attached and your communication platform attached, and then we'll set up the browser. And at that point, you can ask it to do anything. So if you have something else that you want to do, again, if you're concerned about the risk of LinkedIn, you can at that point just say, ask the agent to do anything. I can't confirm how that will work or what will happen if we do, but yes, you can do any use case at that point. And actually, the LinkedIn part is actually only a small part of the process, and it's just an example to show how it works. It'll just have access to a browser, and you can say, go to whatever, and you can take whatever risk you feel comfortable with. Even if you just want to say, could you just go to Google and find me information about something? It's a good example of how that might work.
I guess in theory, we could also create a separate account for our agent. No?
Yes, that is, I think, something that is, we'll talk a little bit about security, how you would potentially manage that. But yes, if you wanted to do that, I just don't think we'd have time in the call necessarily for everyone to do it. But yes, you can set up a fake LinkedIn account and have that as the risk process, especially if you're just doing prospecting and searching. It might work in that way. The only thing that I find quite interesting about that is LinkedIn likes to show you things that are relevant to you. So when you search, they will prioritize people in your network and things that are a little bit more connected to you. So the quality of the information that a fake account is going to get, or it'll be a similar quality of information, but it may not be stuff that's super tied to your network and opportunities in that way. But it's your call entirely.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Any other questions? Everyone's still here? Everyone's still awake? Anyone excited? Cool. We got some emojis, which I can't really see. So luckily I just switched to that window. If you want to, I don't mind people talking over me. So if you want to express excitement and stuff, feel free to talk. As discussed, this is being recorded, but your voices aren't. Okay, cool. Then let's get into it.
So I need you to just imagine that the background hasn't changed to this recording, and this appears to be moving seamlessly on from the last section. And this is definitely not a pre-recorded video that I'm going to walk you through because the technical demo went so badly in the session. But I am now going to walk through the process of getting your OpenClaw agent set up. So the first thing that we need to do is to install a browser called Chromium. Chromium is the freeware version of Google Chrome. Google build this open source browser, and then they build Chrome on top of Chromium by adding features and more premium stuff to get that. While that is downloading, we are going to set up the Telegram agent API key. If you haven't got Telegram, you need to get it installed. You can install it anywhere. You can put it on your desktop. You can put it on your phone, wherever you want. Just for this example, we will use Telegram. There are other channels that, as we discussed, that you can connect to your agent. But for this, we'll be using Telegram. So you need to find botfather, so a user called @botfather, and you are looking for the botfather with a verified flag next to it. You will find other versions pretending to be this botfather. Try and avoid those. Telegram is a terrible place for fraud and spam, so you just want to make sure you've got the botfather with the verified flag next to it. So you will then type /new bot, and that will start your process. You'll ask to give it a name. So I'm going to call mine Lady Botlington II, because Lady Botlington has not worked out quite so well. And then we'll give her a username. So Lady_Botlington, and it must end in bot. So _BOT, or the second _bot. This will then give you an API key for Telegram that we will use later. So now that Chromium has downloaded and we have the API key set up for Telegram, we are going to install Claude Code. This is only for users that want to use Claude. If you're going to use if you're going to use OpenAI, you don't need to do this step. So type brew install Claude-code. Then when that is finished running, just run Claude setup token. This will prompt you to walk through a authorization flow with Claude. Just log in how you would normally log in. If it's Google, then do that. Or if you're using an email, log in with the email. Then what will happen is they will send you a link to validate it. If you don't have the browser set up within the virtualized environment, you can just go to your tab and on your desktop, and it will give you this code to copy. So you copy that code and then just paste this into this box. And then when you go back, you have to authorize it. But then when you go back to the command line, you will see that you have this long password-like type code. This is your API key that we will use later when we do the setup of Claude code. Sorry, when we do the setup of OpenClaw. Now, next we're going to install OpenClaw. We will type npm install -global OpenClaw, then and we're going to give it a version number. So we're going to do 2026.3.1. So that is the version of OpenClaw that was released at the beginning of March. We're going to do that because we know that version works. We had problems with version 3.2 that was launched on the 2nd of March. So now once that is done, you'll run OpenClaw on board. And then we will step through first how you onboard with Claude, and then we'll go back and we'll show how it is with OpenAI. So you select Anthropic, you select Anthropic token, and then you paste that token that we got in the last step into this thing. You can give it a name, doesn't matter what it is, you can leave that blank. Now, I would suggest at this point choosing Claude Sonnet as the model. You can use Claude Opus when you are selecting the model, but it really burns through your credits quite quickly. And I found even doing sort of fairly simple tasks with Claude Opus would get you pretty quickly to your monthly subscription limits. And I think Claude Sonnet 4.7 is actually pretty good at most tasks. So that would be my recommendation. Once you have selected that, you'll be asked to set up Telegram, but we're going to go back and show how OpenAI works. When you select OpenAI, you want to select the OpenAI Codex ChatGPT OAuth, and then what this will do, OAuth is a process that automates the login flow, or we will go back again to a browser, similar how we did to get the Claude Code token, but this will then be integrated directly into the OpenClaw setup. It opens up a browser, you go to the browser, you log into your ChatGPT account, whatever that might be, and it'll ask if you have 2FA. It will also ask you to add your 2FA details. So this is where if you are using Authenticator, you would want to use your Authenticator code. So great. So then the next step, you click continue. And then it'll say go back to your terminal. And then we should just now have the ChatGPT models to select from. In this selection, I would recommend choosing a non-codex model. So you'll see that they have GPT 5.1, GPT 5.2, but then they have these GPT 5.1 codex models. If you want to use your OpenClaw for coding, then I would recommend potentially using one of the codex models. But if you want to use it for more general stuff, these codex models are tailored specifically towards software engineering and writing code. So use either GPT 5.1 or GPT 5.2. GPT 5.1 might use slightly less of your allowance and you might be a little bit more efficient with your token usage, but there's not going to be much difference between 5.1 and 5.2. So I would probably choose GPT 5.2 for this setup. So select 5.2. Now we're going to set up the Telegram. We'll select Telegram from that option, and then we'll go to Telegram and we will take that API key that we have here. And then at the top, you'll see the link for your bot when you want to go and talk to them later. So copy this code, and then you can click through to your agent. Paste your API key for Telegram. And now we're going to set up skills. For this example, we're only going to set up ClawHub. ClawHub then allows you to download additional skills and software for Claude. Later, we're going to use npm as the method of install. Now it'll ask you for loads of API keys. You'll just select no for all of these. These are for other things we don't want to do. And then it'll ask you to enable hooks. We will then select all of these: bootmd, bootstrap extra files, command logger, and session memory. These just help you configure your agent a little bit better in the future. Then your gateway is started. So we will do this. We'll not choose any of the interaction options for here. We'll just say do this later. So now you are set up. OpenClaw is running on your virtual machine. So we will go back to Telegraph to start interacting with the agent. Just say hi. And then what it will do now is it'll ask you to pair the chat, your phone or your machine with your OpenClaw. This is done to stop OpenClaw responding to anyone, because technically it is available in Telegraph, and if someone was to guess the name of your agent, they could send it a message. But this process just stops the agent from wanting to respond, or stops the agent at all from responding to anyone else. So we will copy and paste this OpenClaw pairing approve command here at the bottom, and then we will go back to the command line where we set up Claude Code, set up OpenClaw, and just paste that, and then that will unlock your pairing with the agent. So now we should have a functioning OpenClaw agent at this point. So we will just send it a message to wake it up. And the first message that it will respond with is ask to configure who this agent is. They'll ask for a name and they'll ask for your name so that they can communicate with you. And then at this point, you can also start to define a little bit I don't want to say the personality is probably the easiest way to define it, but the way that your agent will think. So you can then just give it some instructions in terms of what its name is and what you want to call it. In this example, I've said that they are Lady Botlington II, and I am Phil, and I've said that if they want to pick, that they can pick their first name to be whatever they want. The agent then comes back with a response eventually. It's not super fast, the OpenClaw agent, I will say that, so you sometimes might have to wait a little while for a response. And what this kind of potentially does every now and again is it gives you a little bit of a challenge of whether to know whether it's actually working or whether it's gone away. But give it sometimes 30 seconds it takes to respond specifically to complicated problems. So now I'm going to ask it, and it decided that its name was Millicent, Lady Millicent Botlington II, which is an incredible name. So we are now going to start the LinkedIn prospecting process. So I've written this prompt that is to just say, describe a little bit the challenge that we have that we want to prospect for the next version of this course. But there is a little gotcha here in that because we are running Linux on a Mac machine, we are restricted in the browser that we can run, which is this Chromium version. And the Chromium version that we've installed is a little bit restricted on the operating system, which means that out of the box, the OpenClaw agent struggles to connect to that browser. And that is, if you were on the course yesterday, why we had a problem connecting it to the browser. Something had changed and the browser was a little bit more restricted. But the beauty of OpenClaw is that it is smarter than most people at how to work these kind of things. It does have that technical background that you might not. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to say to our agent and explain the problem that they have Chromium installed, but it is via Snap. So there are some restrictions that will cause it to not be able to access it. Could it give us some ideas about how we would manage that problem? And then it'll go away and think. And then in this scenario, it responded with two possible options. The first one it responds with is a kind of quite a complicated setup, which actually doesn't really help, is to install Chrome. And unfortunately, we can't do that in this example because Chrome doesn't have a version that is designed to run on Linux, on Apple, the hardware. So we can't use that. So we're going to use option B, which sounds a little bit technical. I do realize that in this example, I didn't tell the OpenClaw agent that I was non-technical and to be a little bit more forgiving. So it has given some quite detailed explanations of how this might work. But what is great here is it then gives us this second option, which is to do some run the Chromium in a slightly different way. If we scroll down, so it gives you this command. And then what I will do is I will actually respond to the agent and say, great, let's do option B, because that's the one I think is going to work, but can you do it? Can you run this command? And can you remember to run this command in the future? So I said there's no Chrome version, so let's go for option B. But are you able to run that command and remember it for the future? So I'm giving it permission to do that. So it now goes away and it thinks about it a little bit. It updates its internal documentation to say, oh, this is the way that we will be using the browser going forward. And then it has also opened me up a browser where I am able to link in. So we go back to our virtual machine. We can log in with the same password. We now have a browser that is set up, and this is working, that the OpenClaw is now has access to and is actually controlling. So if we go to LinkedIn and we will sign in, just use your standard username and password. I think someone mentioned in the course earlier that it might make sense to create your own LinkedIn account, a newer LinkedIn account for your agent. I think that potentially makes sense. It does restrict and stop you from getting blocked, but it does mean it doesn't have kind of the context of your account. So now we are logged into LinkedIn and working. So I am just defining now what the actual task is. I'm saying, look, this is my course, and I want you to use your own logic to decide the target, but could you find me 5 potential leads for the class? And then the agent will go away. I have sped this up a little bit in the video. This will take some time before they come back. But then eventually, after they've done some searching and gone through the thing, they will respond back with what they've done. They've said they're looking for non-technical founders, people who have expressed some kind of AI curiosity, so people who are responding or looking for posts, and it's given me a few strong fits that it's found in on LinkedIn and the links through to them. And then this is where you can start to expand this out, and you can say, look, maybe give me some personalized outreach for these people, maybe be a bit more detailed. Maybe these aren't quite the right things that you are looking for. Maybe you want to narrow down and define it a little bit more, but you would just do that by talking to the agent like you would if this was like an intern doing this job. You say, look, hey, actually, I think these are great. Let's stick with these couple of people, but actually, can we just fine tune the other things? So now, very quickly, in about 15 minutes, you have a OpenClaw set up, working and checking LinkedIn for you. So that's amazing. Anyway, we will go back to past Phil. Oh, sorry, we are not.
Any questions before we go into the summary bit?
I have a question.
Go on.
Is it better to set up one agent for everything, or would you rather set up separate agents for separate tasks?
It's a good question. I am using one agent for everything. That's how I've set mine up. But what that does is it potentially increases your risks. And you basically, this one agent that I have does have access to my LinkedIn. It has access to some Slack groups that I'm a member of, and it has access to, actually it doesn't have access to my email anymore. It has access to its own email. So you may want to run different agents for different things if you wanted to isolate that risk. But yeah, it really depends. It really depends. And also if you wanted to look at cost management as well, you might want to run things on certain accounts and there. But I don't think there's, from a technical perspective, there's not really any reason you would separate them out, other than unless you really wanted to, if you are pushing the limits of the hardware that you're running on. What was the reason for the question? What are you thinking about?
No, I just wanted to understand, because I guess what I understand so far is if like having just one agent for multiple tasks is maybe better because it has broader context, and then I guess it's smarter in a way. But then I understand safety component, and then I think I just saw online people creating like, hey, I have whatever 10 agents, 20, 100. So I wanted to understand the reason behind that.
I think the interesting thing you mentioned about the context and the smarter thing, it actually, one of the challenges with these agents is their context windows, and they only have a certain amount of context before they need to shift the conversation some way, either compact the conversation and try and keep some of the important information or store it into some sort of memory, which actually means if you have a lot of things going on in one agent, they might not necessarily be smarter. They might forget things. So if you give them too many tasks, just like you model it like a human, if you give them too many tasks, they will start to forget topics and things will drop out after that. Cool. So I'm going to just run across a few additional topics. What next? What next would be actually getting the agent up and running. I hope I can give enough information for people after the session that will allow them to do that. But I want to talk a little bit about some security things and best practices. There are standard things that you do in terms of software security that you should do, which is in terms of managing and thinking about where your passwords are saved and stored. You have to think about who has access to those passwords and be careful. There are some documentation that I'll share in terms of how OpenAI safety and security works in terms of managing those credentials. But I really think these agents work in a way that we haven't really necessarily answered all of the questions in terms of security. So how I like to approach this is I treat the agent like a new employee. So like a working student who doesn't really understand what's going on and doesn't have all of the context. How would I treat this with a working student? Would I give a working student this level of access? Would I log a working student into my LinkedIn and let them go wild in my LinkedIn? My LinkedIn's not that important to me. So yes, I would, but I wouldn't give them access to my bank account. I wouldn't give them access to my email account necessarily. So think a little bit about probation periods, like running tests and running the agent to do certain things and building trust up over time, managing the access that it has to certain things, and then building trust gradually. There's two really interesting incidents recently. A security advisor, someone who works in security for Meta, let their OpenClaw access their full inbox, and it just deleted everything, even though she specifically said, please don't delete the emails. It was like, okay, cool, I will delete the emails. So this is the thing about it not necessarily knowing when to stop. She had to run across the image that was the story that was told about this is she had to run across the office and then unplug her machine from deleting her emails. And then the other thing is also a really interesting example is that someone set up an OpenClaw. They called it Lobster Wild after Oscar Wilde, and gave it some instructions to be as enigmatic and ridiculous online as possible. And through a series of fascinating events, it was able to get its hands on nearly $500,000 worth of cryptocurrency and then sent it to a random person on it. So just considering what these agents have access to is quite important still. The other thing that I think is really important is to do a risk assessment, which maybe I should have done before starting this call, which is thinking about what might go wrong, how likely it is to go wrong, and what is the impact if it goes wrong? And then what could you do to mitigate that situation? For example, I have Gary is in my emails and he's doing the onboarding to some of these courses. I can see the audit trail of what he's sending and the emails he's sending, and he also okays them with me first. So I'm not super worried about the emails that he sent, but there is a small likelihood that he will make a mistake, but the impact is less important, mainly because I'm presenting him as an agent that works like that. So I think people are expecting potential there'll be some issues there. And then how do I mitigate it? I've now given him access to his own email box and he authorizes things with me before he moves on. Rodolphe just touched on it. I would at this point not give your agent access to money or the ability to spend money on your behalf. I just think that is just at this point too risky. I think we need to do a lot of work technically before that is something that makes sense. This may be a cautionary tale, I have an inkling suspicion that my agent might have clicked a boost post button on my LinkedIn, and LinkedIn have charged me 50 euros. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have billing set up on your LinkedIn account, maybe that's not the best, maybe something to think about before you give your agent access to that. And then the other thing that I think is really important is to test everything. Before you rely on it, verify that it works, ask it to run the things in a test environment and test it and go do trial runs and make sure and say, look, if you're going to get it to, for example, if you're going to send an email, say, can you please write me the brief of the email before you send it so you can verify what it's going to send. Cool. So that's kind of security. And then this was a topic that came up at the beginning that I wanted to spend a little bit more time in. If we had got the virtualization running, one of the limitations of that virtualization is that it is running on your local machine. So your agent effectively goes to sleep when you go to sleep. So there are a couple of other options to do that. So you can, again, you can run locally, or you can run some things. You can run it on the cloud on a virtual server, or you can build an OpenClaw dedicated machine. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a Mac Mini. I'm using a Mac Mini, but it can be a Windows machine or a Linux machine that is running locally. And there are some pros and cons to each of these things. If you run it in the cloud, it is always on. It is fully isolated. The cost will vary, but you might be spending something like an extra $20 euros a month to have a virtual machine that can work. And the setup is complicated. One of the things that the reason I like using it with a desktop environment is I tend to find that the browser works. It didn't work today. Pass around that topic. And then again, setting up, if you want to set up multiple instances, it's quite easy to spin up a new virtual machine. But the challenge here is that most OpenAI and Anthropic for sure block virtual machines from using the subscription tokens. If you want to use the subscription tokens, you normally have to be running a machine that's on the same network that you would normally be using code, or they identify it as being running on a server and they will block and not let you use those tokens. So you will have to use API usage-based tokens. The virtualization that we talked about, if you still want to, it is not always on. When you close your machine, that will close down. It is isolated. The cost is free in exerted commas other than your time. And the setup is reasonably complicated, but reasonably simple. It's manageable, I think, for everyone. The only challenge here then, if you want to run multiple instances, is that you would need to be running multiple virtual machines. And actually, most computers aren't really able to run more than one virtual machine because you're already running two operating systems. If you have a super powerful machine, you might get away with running multiple virtualizations on there, but it's going to start getting really resource heavy. So then the other option is to have a separate machine. It is always on. It is fully isolated. The cost is how much it costs you to get a setup. There is a small challenge there at the moment in that it has become incredibly expensive, the memory that computers use. So getting hold of like smaller machines is actually quite expensive at the moment, but it is a one-time cost. And that's the thing, getting set up is equal to the virtualization. It's fairly easy to set up once you have the machine set up. Multiple instances, I put not possible, but it is possible where you have to buy multiple machines. And if you're running that machine on the same network that you are normally using your subscription, you can use your subscription mod. And then the other option is to just run things locally. Not always on. It's the same problem with virtualization. If you close down that, it'll go off. It is not isolated. It has access to everything on your machine. The cost is free in inverted commas. Setup is fairly easy, but then you also can't run multiple instances, but you can use your subscription token. And then one of the most important things is the restart command. So if you have any problems normally running over, the restart command is what you want to manage. Okay, any questions at this point on what I've just said or the session as a whole?
Under ideal operating conditions, how often do you update the software?
I've been updating it every couple of days. I've been updating it up until this point every couple of days and I haven't had any problems. I think on this topic, waiting, if you have a version that is working for you, maybe not rushing to update is the best option. It's very easy to switch between versions though. So just as long as you remember what version you're running, updating isn't so difficult. You can roll back, as we went through that process of rolling back to another version. But I definitely wouldn't be updating it every day. As we've discovered, there are some problems that are creeping in because this software is just developing so quickly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Are you going to do a follow-up of this course?
I'll come on to that. So some next things, keep experimenting. If you do get it work, there's some other things you could try. I will share all the slides in the session. There are some docs. And then keep an eye on Handpicked newsletter because we're going to run some more courses. We are going to run this session again, hopefully better. I think I've got quite a few learnings from this session that I'm going to take away. I'm feeling pretty beaten up, but not too beaten up because it was always meant to be a test to see how this would go and how working with people who classify themselves as non-technical would run through. There's always going to be room for improvement. But yes, we are going to run another OpenClaw course, the same one, but then a more advanced one. But then also we're looking at some other topics as well. We're going to look at just generally using terminal tools, using Claude Code and building stuff from then. And then also a slightly more advanced course looking at like coming from Claude Code Hacker or OpenClaw Hacker through to CTO. And in that course, we'll talk a little bit more in terms of real risk assessments, technical stuff, but also thinking about data storage and how that might work and these kind of like more advanced technical topics on an accessible level. But yes, there will be more courses. They will be announced through the Handpicked newsletter. If you want to stay in contact and follow me, this is my LinkedIn. If you need any software engineering, need some consultancy, or want to talk a little bit more about this topic, I will send some follow-up information that will hopefully convince you I do know what I'm talking about on this topic. And then the other thing, which I would massively appreciate, even given the fact that things maybe didn't work out quite as smoothly as we wanted to, if you could give me some feedback. I'll share this link through the email when I share all the stuff. Anyway, yeah, thank you. And thank you for your patience for sticking around, even though that didn't quite go as smoothly as I think everyone had hoped for. Any questions, any thoughts, and any feedback at this point? Did people find it useful, even if we didn't get to the working environments?
So I have to say, I am at the moment, I've done everything as supposed to be. I have everything set up and running on LinkedIn. And now actually the interesting part starts. So how do I work with it?
Yes.
Thanks for helping us or me to set up. So
Okay, good.
I would be really interesting in how to continue now.
Yeah, I will. There will be like, feel free to reach out and we can discuss that potentially one-on-one. But also, I will. Yeah, we'll have a 201 session as well, which will talk a little bit about some of the more detailed things and what you could option. But I would say, like, just investigate and play around with it. There's so much there. Like, one of the really useful things about this system is that you can ask it what it can do, and it knows about itself. So you can just say, look, hey, look, I want to do this, or this is a possibility. Could you help me with that? How do we move forward? What do we need to do to get that set up? So you can do these things pretty simply just by talking to it, getting it set up in that way.
I really enjoyed it. I found it super useful. So thank you so much. I was lost early on just because I couldn't find the password for my ChatGPT. So I was out at that threshold. And as an idea, like for future sessions like this, I think it could work really well if we had this set up as the video, just like you explained the onboarding first, which also was amazingly made, to be honest. Like, I really appreciate it because I think those kind of explanations can be done in a way that just like lets you replay it 100 times and you still don't get it. I think you did it really well. And also the instructions that came with that, so you could like copy paste stuff. So having that also for the rest of the setup part, and then using this space so we can bombard you with even more questions and try out the different things. Yeah, look into the use cases. I think that could be a pretty cool setup.
Yeah, and that was what I was aiming for, really. Like this onboarding flow that just went wrong at every possible step. I've run it 20 times over the last week and it's been absolutely fine and it's run beautifully every single time. But obviously there is a thing with software. The second you put it in, you try to demo it in front of people, everything falls apart. So yes, I think it probably makes sense to just have the extra steps up until the point where you actually have the agent running as the onboarding, and then we can go through like the details and play around with it and have these kind of things. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's just like the opportunity to ask questions, which I think is really valuable because like people will probably create, if not already, a bunch of YouTube videos where you can just watch them and do the same thing. But like the being able to ask you questions, I think this is the whole differentiator.
Yeah, and I think that's why one of the core reasons is like whenever I go through YouTube videos, there's also a point where I'm like, wait, what? I didn't quite get that, and then I get so, which is also you'll see in the video, I realized I'd done the same thing and I jumped in and went, oh, actually, this isn't good enough. I need to update it. But yeah, I think that was cool in the fan. But this was meant to be like 10 minutes going through that onboarding, and then we would go through and talk about how to use this technology and stuff. But you live and you learn. But I'm glad some people found it useful.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next ones.
Oh, cool.
So Phil, one question from my side. So supposing we get this agent set up inside the virtualized machine, and just wanted to know, just having this Claude subscription, the Pro 20 euros, is it enough for that? Like just playing around with it, just not really just getting on board with things, and because I want to spend 100 euros just for per month, I can spend 1-2 times.
Yeah, I think it's definitely enough for playing around. Absolutely. You will definitely get an idea of what is possible with that 20 euros. And actually, I think it's probably good enough but doing some simple tasks. I think if you wanted to set, for example, I have Gary looking for events for me to go and network at, and it scans like meetup.com once a week. And I think doing something that you're doing once a week or something will be fine within that subscription. It's just, I would say if you're doing it to do 2 or 3 times a day, that's when you're going to start hitting your subscription. And also, but it also depends on how complicated the task is, because it's about tokens sent back and forward. So if you say, Gary, can you read this book for me every hour? You're going to just blow your tokens because it's just reading like large amounts of text and then returning large amounts of text. So that's maybe not so useful. But if it's like really simple repeated tasks, and the other thing actually that OpenClaw does well is it writes down tasks and runs like cron. So it doesn't need all of the context repeatedly. If you do them once and go back and forth, it will define the task quite detailed, so it knows how the queue. It's not amazing at doing it. It can be a bit of a both sometimes, but the second time you do something, you want to use less tokens. You can say, hey, Gary, can you send those emails? And it'll be like, yeah, cool. And you haven't done the back and forth. But yes, that's a very long way to answer your question. Yes, the 20 euros a month will allow you to play around. And I think actually probably you should be able to get some value from the 20 euros a month. But what I would say on top of that is I'm paying 100 euros a month, and the value that I get back is way more than 100 euros. I did some rough calculations, and I think I'm saving myself about an hours a week at least with this stuff. So I can very easily justify 40 hours a week for 100 euros a month for my workflows. Absolutely. And also Gary has found me some work that I have, and not loads. I don't want to say like he's got me like hundreds of thousands of euros for the contracts. Like I've had a couple of €100 contracts through the stuff that Gary's found for me, but that pays back. Like it's paying for Gary's paying his rent basically for me. But I do think but if you have some really high value stuff that you can put it on, I think it's quite easy to see you might want to spend those kind of things. But no, 20 euros is fine. I think it will get somewhere.
What are some of the most expensive jobs it can do? I mean, like actions.
It's
Because I don't know.
you have to basically, the way that this is all built is related to tokens, and tokens are just chunks of text. And the more text you send to the model or the model sends back to you, the more expensive it is. Right. So if you're like, that's the easiest way to think about it. But for example, if you say, Gary, write me a haiku, right? That's going to be fairly small because it's actually a small amount. Even though there's a reasonable amount of processing that happens on the back end, you pay for what comes back and forth from that model, right? Text comes back, pay for all the text you've sent. It's what you pay for. And that's what's included in the subscription as well. You aren't paid specifically for that text, but the more text you do, the closer you'll get to the subscription. So things like scanning a whole website for loads of information and looking for bits and pieces is going to be more expensive. Or tasks where there are multiple steps. So if the agent is having to go, what do I do now? Do I do something now? Do I do something now? All of that is going to use up more tokens. But it is a little difficult to say this is going to cost you X and this is going to cost you Y, because it really depends.
It's like steps and decision making. Oh.
Yeah, like I wouldn't necessarily say decision making per se, because that's like how much it uses the thinking isn't necessarily going to make more tokens. It is just and let me just go back. I can go back to a slide that might help a little bit.
I think I heard somewhere that, for example, if it does research, it takes a lot of tokens because it needs to like kind of take a screenshot of each page through. Is that how it works?
Yeah, and it changes that screenshot into tokens, either by turning it into text or actually just like chunking up the image as an image and storing those. So like large amounts of information that it is processing, it's the volume of it's not necessarily the amount of processing it's doing, it's the volume of the information that it's processing is what you're paying for. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but I think the easiest way to think about it is just like how much of something is flowing through the internet. If you look, this is the kind of very high level how OpenClaw is working. It's this flow of things that flow between the gateway and the models and the gateway and the tools. So anything that is in those two lower arrows, the more information that is flowing in those arrows, the more that you're going to spend. So if it goes to a browser and reads a huge website and then pulls it into the model and then sends it to the model, that's going to be more expensive than if it goes to an API and pulls like a concise set of data from the API and sends that to the model.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, got time for
maybe a bit more rudimentary questions. Maybe you just said it and I missed it. Now we have set it all up. So when I want to go back to it, so I start the Linux machine. Do I have to run the terminal and open OpenClaw in some way? Run open the browser of LinkedIn? How do I work with it?
You shouldn't need to, right? So you should just, if you open up the virtualized machine, the gateway should start in the same state that it was before, and you should be able to just communicate through whatever communication platform you wanted with Telegram. It's not, what I would say is you might need to go into the command line and run that OpenClaw gateway restart. And then that just resets the status and you'll find it. If you type and they're not responding, go in and and that will fix most of the problems. And also the agent might ask you to go in to the virtualized machine and run some commands at some point. Like it was asking me to reboot and restart itself. So that might be the case, but it will guide you into what you need to do.
And does it need the browser open for, I don't know, LinkedIn in that case, if I use that as prospecting and searching?
So the way that it should work, if you get it set up, is it will open up a browser for you to log your details in. And then that browser can probably be, what it probably will do is we'll leave that browser open and it will just navigate through, and you can actually watch it navigating the browser, but it's happening inside this virtualized machine. So you can leave it just running in the virtualized machine. It might not do that, and it might go into what is called a headless state, and then just will run it in the background, and you don't see the browser. Okay. But
I have sorry.
Go on. Sorry.
No, when you send the pre-recorded video, will you show us how to connect it to LinkedIn in that one?
Yes, I will go through everything that I was going to go through and show you today, and we'll go.
Okay.
So you will end up in that video. We'll show you how it should work, and I will. What I would do in that process, I will very much isolate the versions of these things, so we know we're all running the same version of OpenClaw to make it work. But yes,
Cool.
at the end of that video, you will have the working LinkedIn bot.
Okay. And will you send we just have to look at the handpicked newsletter to see your next courses, or will you send them through?
I will send, I've got the list of the emails, so I'll send through information to everyone on this call about those things. If you don't want me to email you updates, please let me know and I will not spam you anything. But yeah, I will update people when those courses are announced.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Then we are back on 7, which was when we were meant to end. I have a son who wants to use this bed behind me, so I'm going to have to go. But thank you very much. I really appreciate your patience. I wished it would have run through but you will have all of the information in the next couple of days that you would have had anyway. So I'm glad it was of use to some people, and enjoy the rest of your day. And I would also, the other thing I forgot to say, when you get these things working, I would love to know what you're doing with them. If you can send me some information through, that would be super helpful. And also, if you want to send a testimonial we can use, maybe it's not the smoothest thing, but maybe there was some useful stuff in this, then please send that through as well, and we can use that for the next courses. But enjoy the rest of the day, and I might see some of you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, I am then authenticating. I'll come back to, Christian, I'll come back to your question in a second. Just making sure this doesn't time it. As I said, Claude had some performance issues yesterday and over the weekend, and I don't think they've fully recovered. Definitely start. It's like any of the
I've got the same problem. It's not finding the command for Claude.
Okay, let's go back to Claude Code then and see if I can. You've probably reconnected. That's all the problem with live demo. It feels like it might be a Claude problem because I can't even get this to to load up in my browser. I'm just getting this set up. Okay, so what we're going to do is, I think for time's sake, for those using Claude, we'll have to, I think we'll have to skip on some, obviously. And as you can see, we're talking about the recency of the development of the software. This is OpenClaw version 2006 3.2. So that is the version of OpenClaw that was released yesterday, 2nd of March. And then it will say authentication. As I said, so much easier for ChatGPT than the Claude process. And now I have, coming back to that terminal window, and might take some time. Okay, I'm going to quit out of this and try again because something looks like it's hung. If you need to quit out of it, use Control-C. So I'm going to start again the onboarding and just see what's on with these and then continue. Great. So I now have error.
I also have the same error.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got the same error, just so you know.
Of course, this is going to not work as well. Okay, I am going to hold my hand up and admit defeat at this point.